And that's why I don't like to claim that I found Jojo or I found Danny, because like
This is Empyre, the man who scouted Danny and Jojopyun, even if he's too humble to admit it. In this episode of the LS Show, we talk about the most important skill a scout needs to have,
is being able to differentiate between uh, all these good players and spot out this is the guy, this is the guy, and this is the guy.
why Danny is the best NA80 carry we've ever found.
There's no player in NA history that could really compare to this kid.
Flyquest's long-term goals for this roster,
Yeah, like I said, I don't think there's gonna be like a pipeline ace at the end of the year.
and addressing my concerns for how Flyquest will help Masu and Busio develop.
So we made a very big conscious choice to find a good positional coach for them to help them in that area.
So thank you so much for coming on. I wanted to talk a little bit about your process on actually scouting players. Like, when do you start your process? Are you constantly throughout the year scouting? Are you waiting until the end of the year and then scouting so that you can get a player onto the team? Like, how do you go about your job?
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. Well, it really starts. It actually never stops. Like I never stop looking at players, so it's an ongoing process throughout the year. Um, there's always league going on, whether it's solo queue, amateur tournaments, challengers league, qualifiers, LCS, and other regions have things going on all year round. And so the essence of it is to create a list of players by searching databases, Wikipedia, Goal.gg, uh, even like Twitter, trying to find players, uh, at least like newer players that are entering the scene or like trying to aspire to become pro players, finding out who they are, seeing if there's anything interesting about them that stands out. How long they've been playing, obviously their age, yes, does is taken into consideration. Their performance in whatever they're playing in, their solo queue, in houses, tryouts, uh, amateur games, etc., etc. And then yeah, from there, just creating a short list of um, the players that you're interested in, and then I just keep track of their games throughout the year, and then I have a I have a filtering process of which games I end up scouting, and then from those games I have a rating system of the things I'm looking at for every player, and it becomes standardized. It's like a standardized rating of different attributes that I'm looking at, and that helps with kind of standardizing the process, and so that there isn't you're not going too much off of anecdotes and memory, and you have things written down. You have numbers on a page, on a spreadsheet to kind of guide you through. Okay, this game he did this game he did that, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's generally how it is. And then at the end of the year, when it comes to off season, I have all these scouting reports for each player, and like each report has about, you know, depending on uh, depending on the level that we're looking at, between 8 to 10 games, I would say, uh, on average that I'm looking at for each player. Obviously, I'm going to be watching more throughout the year, but in the end, uh, I take a sample size of that, and like I said, there's a filtering process of which kind of games I'm looking at to kind of give the portfolio of games I have variety. Um, but yeah, in essence, I guess this is not part of the question, but like going into it, like what I really want to see from a player is something they excel in and they can stand out in that's different from other players. And those are the ones that I put at the top of my.
Is that like, if I'm a rookie trying to stand out, is that like my champion pool? Is that like focusing on laning? Is that macro? Like, what exactly are you, as a rookie who wants to get into the league, what should he try to focus on standing out in? Like, what does that mean?
Mm. So in essence, I would say I would like put the term as the having a an attribute or something about you that kind of breaks the game or can wins the game or wins the game game impact, like in short, like it basically has game impact, and it can come from draft, it can come from champion pool, it can come from your laning. For example, Jojo, the way he lanes breaks the game for because how enemies need to draft against him is centered around his laning. How teams play the early game versus him is centered around his laning. So the way what makes him special is uh, partly is his lane phase, and because the way he lanes breaks the game and has such huge impact on like how his team is going to do. So that's one example. The other example, obviously, could be Danny or even Berserker, like the way they team fight, uh, break the game. You need to be like either in draft or like putting them behind, or like the way you approach team fights need to be. You need to heavily consider how do we get Berserker, how do we get Danny out of their comfort zone in team fights so that they don't have a high effect on the game. Because otherwise they're just going to smurf on you. And so yeah, so like these are two attributes, lane phase, team fighting. Obviously there can be other things. For example, Adam over in the LEC, one thing that he does that not many top laners do is if he gets prio in lane, he roams to mid lane and ganks, and that's not very a common thing that top laners do, and catches people off guard every now and then. That's something that breaks the game, that has high game impact, and that's a skill he has that not many other top laners provide to teams. So yeah, it can come in many different forms, and that's what I try to look at players, because the players that can have these sort of game impactful moments are the ones that um, contribute such like a high percentage of why their teams do well or why their teams win the game.
It's very interesting that you say it's almost like whatever niche they have in order to win the game. That's what like makes them stand out. It doesn't. It's not a specific thing. But you did mention Jojo and Danny, and like you're obviously the scout that scouted them onto EG. Um, Peter Dunn had talked about like the list that you gave him, and he even mentioned how like Jojo didn't necessarily have the best of stats, but you when you watch him play, you could tell immediately that this guy was going to be great. Same for Danny. Like he watched Danny's VODs and he was like, this doesn't look that great. But then when you told him about his ping situation, he was like, oh my god, he's playing this at like 80 ping or something. So how do you differentiate like stats and a score line? Um, Normally that's like the first step, right? So you look at a person's stats, and if their stats sucks, you're probably not going to watch many of his games, right? So how are you able to like tell, okay, these stats might indicate that he's not the greatest, but it also might indicate that he has a different play style, or that I should look more into him.
Okay, so the question is about stats versus how they perform.
Yeah, I just used the two examples of Jojo and Danny because at least they didn't have like insane stats when you showed it
I
to Peter
mean,
Dunn.
for Jojo, um, for Jojo, sort of, I mean, I'm not sure about Peter, because like this was what 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
But for me, when I watched Jojo and Solkyu, he was like completely dominating. And I think everyone can see he was dominating, and that's why I don't like to claim that I found Jojo or I found Danny, because like they were both really high elo and smurfing almost every game. Everyone knew about them, so like who really found them? When and I guess this is not really your question, but I want to say this at the front of this interview is I think a scout's main job, at least in League of Legends, because of how leaderboards work and how publicized a player is, that unless maybe you find them when they're really young and they're still like in Diamond and Master and you track them from then, maybe you can claim, yeah, like I saw him first or whatever. But in general, I think that what a scout's main skill should be is able to analyze and basically analyze how well this player is going to translate like from solo queue or from amateur to pro play at the highest level, and how good are they actually going to become? Can they become cornerstone pieces for your org or on an LCS org? How well can they do internationally? And that's the biggest skill. Because yeah, there are a ton of good players. There are a ton of good players that can make it to academy and do really well in academy, or make it to LCS and perform at a decent level. But uh, the biggest skill a scout needs to have is being able to differentiate between uh, all these good players and spot out, this is the guy, this is the guy, and this is the guy. And I think that's what I really excel at compared to a lot of people who vouch for players, or vouch for players on the scene, is that I'm really strict about who's good and who is good. Um, so yeah, and then going back to your question about like stats versus performance for Jojo, so I the thing, it's not really stats, but he like what he does or did and still kind of does is in a more lax environment like scrims, in houses, solo queue, amateur tournaments, he would int a lot and die a lot. And sometimes on stage in the LCS, he has done that as well. Um, and so, but like you could still see that outside of those moments, he still had an insane level of how he approaches lane and how he mechanically executes, just skill combinations on different champions like LeBlanc or Akali or Silas. Those are like some of his main champions of the time, still are. As for Danny, I'm not sure about Peter, but even on the ping, I could tell like Danny was insane. Like team fighting wise, there's no player in NA history that could compare that can really compare to this kid.
Wow.
I think the way he performs team fights is like an art form. Like it's like really beautiful because it just feels like he's dancing the lines in and out so beautifully, and a lot of times like he's just doing things that the enemy just can't touch him because he's just dancing on the line so well. Like I still to this day go back and watch like old games, like old scrims, old amateur games, and LCS games, and like damn, like that was just too good. And honestly, Danny ruined scouting ADC for me like this past couple of years because like it's just like it's hard to find someone who can team fight like that in the West. Um, and so yeah, in general, um, oh, and Danny obviously in solo queue, his stats were insane. Like if you go to his OPGG pages back then, I mean you can probably still see them in the champion history pages. Like it's all gold KDAs. it's like it's like it's like 7 KDA, 6 KDA, 8 KDA. Like
Wow.
this guy had like a beautiful OPGG. But in general, you shouldn't take stats that much into account, at least at that level, when it comes to solo queue or amateur stats, because the games are so chaotic and the play is very lax. So the player is going to be in a more lax environment. Um, and in the end, you use the stats to supplement and give you an idea of like something's happening here. Like for example, the player has -5 CSD. Okay, this player is losing CS, but let's see what's his champion pool. Oh, he's playing Galio, he's playing Lissandra, he's playing I don't know, like champs that don't really have like a very high efficient way to farm, and they roam a lot. And then you watch the game. Oh, he's roaming a lot. Like every wave he's roaming. Um, so stats are interesting and they can be used to try to give you an idea of something that's happening in the game. But you have to actually look at the games to and dig into them to really have a strong idea of what's happening, what's the player doing, how's he performing, what's happening around him, and analyzing it from there. And for me, watching the VODs and analyzing them, having a category of attributes that you find really important uh, for a player to have in the game, and then kind of rating those game to game is really good.
So does that just mean that you have to watch all the games? Like, do you not have
No,
like a sifting process?
yeah, like I mentioned earlier, there's a filtering process. I won't go too much into it, but like it's a process I use, that I actually learned from Kelsey Moser to filter for high quality games that uh, will reveal what I mentioned earlier about a player having, that game impact um, attribute, because if the game is too easy, you're not really going to see that. But
Uh,
but when the game is when the game is at the 50-50, when the game is tense, that's where I think the gems shine the most, um, because that at the heat of it, that's where when a player is going to show their true colors, I think. And obviously, you do I do a sample size, and then sometimes if I'm not 100% sure, I will do a round two of VODs, and then obviously if I do and then obviously I watch most leagues, amateur leagues and ERLs, Korean challengers, and obviously the top regions. I watch them. I watch the VODs around the year, so I have an idea of like how these players are performing. Um, so yeah,
okay, I mean that does make a lot of sense actually. It's like you'd rather watch a game that's very close instead of like a stomp either way, and that'll probably show you more about the player than if everyone's winning their lanes and he's not really being challenged. So I think that does make sense. Um,
yeah,
so just to go back to something that you had mentioned is like you're trying to differentiate. You think what a good scout does isn't say this player is good. It's like this is the good player, right? This is the one. Is that is the aspect of like having something unique to win the game? Is that a big is that sort of what makes the person the good player, or is it like a combination of things?
yeah. I mean, at the basically, uh, they have to they would demonstrate an ability at an elite level, like that they're able to do something at an elite level. Um, and sometimes it's not as refined if they're newer players, but you can see signs that, oh, if you with training and with some refinement, like this is he's going to have some elite skills in the future.
Okay, then how do you go about figuring out how to enable that like refinement of the gems? So you put them on a team, but especially on the West, we might now it's obviously a lot better, but going back like 4 or 5 years, we didn't have the best of coaching staffs. We didn't have the best of like systems to put rookies to succeed. So then, how do you determine like, okay, maybe this rookie requires a bunch of rookies to play, like 20, was it 2020 Mad Lions with like humanoid and four rookies? Or is this more of like, okay, you need a bunch of like veterans, like, obviously 2021 or 2022 EG with like two rookies and three veterans? Um, is that part of what a scout does? Like, does he say, hey, like, take this Jojo and Danny, but you need to have, veterans with them because they're not going to do well with rookies? Or is that something the coaching staff deals with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how much trust the organization and the general manager has in the scout. For me, since I would say since second year of Clutch Gaming, um, that's when I've been able to have trust in from my GMs to advise on construction really heavily. And by the time I'm in EG, uh, after their first off season, so from 2020, right, 2020 onwards, the second year they were in back in the LCS, that's when I had a lot of influence and say in how and roster directions and such. Uh, but yeah, in terms of how to set up the rookies and the young players for success, definitely having one or two veterans helps. But on top of that, it's having the right mesh of personalities to enable an atmosphere for learning, uh, at least for the depending on like the personality of that rookie. So for example, if Jojo has like a very lax attitude to scrims, sometimes he wants to limit test a lot. Having some players on the team who are direct and can kind of smack him around a bit, like inspired like impact helps a lot for him. Um, so yeah, it's just about having veterans help because they have knowledge and history in the game that they can act as sort of another coach in the locker room, and hand that knowledge over to that player, as well as like providing other things like stability, like um, they're comfortable with the competitive game stage. They provide like a lot of a stable ground for the rookies to be able to like make mistakes, um, mess up, and learn from those mistakes because it's really important for rookies to make mistakes on stage, and then the veterans are there to like help them bounce back from them or be like a safety net that okay, you made that mistake, but we can still win this game. We can do this, and that. Because yeah, like Jojo, yeah, he's an MVP now, right? But you know, in his first split, in his first year, he made a lot of mistakes. Danny in his first split, in his first year, he made a lot of mistakes, and those are good. You want rookies to make mistakes because it comes with the territory. When you're a rookie, you don't have that full knowledge, that wide array of skill sets. So making those mistakes when a fan sees a rookie making mistakes, you should be like, yes, it's good. He's going to learn from this and he's going to get better from this. Um, it's very rare that we see a rookie come in and they're just like.
If you're enjoying the interview so far, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It's very interesting. Multiple times now throughout this interview, you've said the same exact thing, or like very similar to what Peter Dunn said in my interview. So when you talked about Danny being an artist, like that's exactly what Peter Dunn said. We were talking about Masu, and he was saying how like Masu might have better laning, but like Danny, when it came to team fights, he was an artist. He was just like drawing a painting.
Poetry in motion.
Yes, poetry in motion. And then just right now, talking about having rookies make mistake on stage, one of the things Peter Dunn was talking about is like rookies aren't able to make mistakes. And like if you want your rookies to succeed, you have to have them like be comfortable making those mistakes. So it's interesting that you both. I mean, I know you both work together, but you both kind of
Yeah, I mean,
see from the same.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that me and him have talked about for working together for 2 years, and we agree on a lot of things on like youth development. So Peter, um, I was like the biggest advocate that as soon as I saw he was leaving Mad Lions, that like we should sign him 100% if we want a proper development project. Like he's the guy that's gonna help us so much because he's got the experience. He knows what rookies need, and yeah, I was really happy that we were able to get him on board for the project.
Okay. Well, right now you're on Flyquest, and I don't know how much you're able to talk about this, but you guys brought in two rookies. I mean, Busio technically isn't a rookie, but for all intents and purposes, in term like any other sport, he would be a rookie, right? He's going to second year, and you have Masu.
Yeah.
And then you have three veterans, Bwipo inspired, who inspired you've worked with before, and Jensen. And at least when it comes to the coaching staff, and even the split length, like it seems like the split is only 6 weeks. The schedule just came out, but this is before like the full post. I think it should be coming out any time now. How is it that you envision, especially with Nuke Duck being the head coach, someone who might be more like a Mithy, where he's like very strategic about the game. Arrow, who's first time I think being an assistant coach, they don't really have the Peter Dunn level of experience of working with rookies and bringing them up. How do you provide an environment where like within 6 weeks you're going into playoffs? Like obviously there's a break in between, but how do you get these players comfortable making mistakes? How do you give them? It seems like it's not a long enough timeline, at least one split, and it seems like Flyquest, at least as an organization, it has pretty often like turnover with their players. Like if they don't succeed, they move on with the next team. So like Amasu and Abusio might feel a lot of pressure of like succeeding now, and that might like hinder their development. So how does all of that? I know that's like a really loaded question.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Okay, so I'll start off by saying that fans should view this as a completely like newly run Flyquest. We have a new GM, and then we have me on board, and then basically a new coaching staff, except for us being able to retain Richard Fantex, who's been with Flyquest for a few years, and an analyst, Joseph, who's also been in Flyquest for multiple years now. Um, and so, besides that, like me and Andrew and I are bringing our vision of how to build teams over from the days of working in Clutch and days from working on EG
Andrew
to
Barton,
FlyQuest.
correct?
Yes, Andrew
Oh,
Barton, who's worked at EG and Clutch Gaming Dignitas. And so we are bringing that vision to FlyQuest, and uh, the idea of why we built this roster is to have uh, players who want to work in NA, and all our imports want to live and work in NA. Um, and we have two young guys, one a rookie and one a sophomore player, who we believe are going to be top players in the league and are going to be longstanding members of the LCS. So we have a lot in place right now from how we want to build this roster to see it be a long-term project, and not to see the FlyQuest turnover. I'm not sure like what exactly happened on previous iterations of FlyQuest rosters, like why there was so much turnover, etc. But from a player perspective and from a management perspective, the way we built this roster and the ideas that the management has is that this is a long-term project. This is not like a win now project. This is something that we want to see be sustainable over multiple years. And yeah, there might be roster changes down the line because that's how the sport works, right? But I highly doubt that we'll see, a full five-man ace at the end of this year because we just have our players, some of the players we have, or I mean, all five players are just have been incredible to work with now that we've worked with them, uh, during media days and workshop days and some scrims, and just talking to them, interviewing them over the off season, watching them play, and we know some of these players intimately. Um, they I'm really excited about all these five players because they have a high dedication to League of Legends, the LCS, uh, and to be able and like a dedication to want to perform at the highest level. So yeah, I'm really excited about these players. I don't think there's going to be, yeah, like I said, I don't think there's going to be like a five-man ace at the end of the year, and that fans should not think of this FlyQuest with the same lens uh, as like previous years because of the new management coming in. So that there's that. In terms of um, the rookies, making sure they have enough room to mess up. I mean, like, yeah, the split is going to be shorter, but that's fine because in the end, 6 out of 8 teams make it to the playoffs, and so as long as we're in the top six, uh, they can mess up in best of ones as much as possible if they want, and then, uh, you know, it's still going to be, there's still going to be a lot of scrim time because I believe there's a break at some point in the split that's like 2 weeks long or 20 days long,
mm-hmm.
and that's going to be more time to like do another like mini boot camp in the middle of the season, middle of the split, uh, to kind of like get the players ready for the second half of the split. And yeah, and then when it comes to playoffs, that's when it's time to perform. You can't make as much mistakes. But even if we do mess up, I don't think we will mess up. But if we do mess up, then we still have the second split. So in the end, it's still going to be a year-long thing. And what matters in the end, while spring split does matter because we do want to make MSI, uh, there's still the whole year to improve, get better, get the rookies and the sophomore players uh, to improve in what they need to improve, and to try to aim for the championship in summer and try to aim to get to Worlds in summer. So we still have the full year. I don't believe that. Generally, I don't think a player should be benched in the during the year. They should at least have 2 splits, at least the full season, before you making your roster changes. But obviously, sometimes you kind of have to in extreme situations where things are going extremely badly. behind the scenes, or you know, in extraordinary circumstances, you might need to bench a player. But generally, at least when it comes to rookies, I think they should be given the full year and be given the chance to prove that they can learn, prove, and perform on stage. And I have really high confidence that Maso and Booster are going to be able to do that.
All right, and then the last part of that, I know was a loaded question, was like you guys brought in more like strategic minds of coaches
Yeah,
rather than like people who might be better with working with rookies.
yeah. So on our coaching staff, we have Nukduk as head coach. We have Richard, who has been, like I mentioned earlier, has been working with Flyquest for the past few years. If teams remember, he was the coach who was coaching the academy team that ended up getting promoted to Flyquest like a couple of years ago, and them doing like pretty well on the LCS stage. That team with the NXI, and they had their mid laner was an Ocean mid laner, and they had like Philip top, I think. Um, but yeah, in general, yeah, we have him on board, and he's shown a lot of uh, experience with working with an academy team with rookies and getting them to level up and be ready for the LCS. He's also a really has a really strong mind for the game. And then we have Arrow, who's going to be, I mean, the biggest reason why we're bringing on Arrow, he's as a positional coach, is because he has so much experience as a bot laner, and he's going to be devoting much of his time to helping Masu and Guisio get better at laning, at all parts of the game, anything that is related to bot lane. Like, he's going to be the guy, and he's also, if you know his personality at all, he's like an extremely great person for vibes around the team. So he's made the rookies extremely comfortable. When he was in Korea, we sent over Busio Masu there to boot camp in Korean solo queue, and he was there with them, helping them review their solo queue, setting up 2v2s uh, for them with bot lanes in LCK challengers, and reviewing those with them. So we made a very big conscious choice to find a good positional coach for them to help them in that area. And then on top of that, we added Damonte as a performance coach, and he's someone who's been stepping up a lot to kind of like bring really positive vibes for the team, and make the environment really hospitable for not just the rookies, but like everyone. Just everyone has like this uh, friendly attitude, and like this brotherly bond. And he's done a couple of workshops with them, and they've been great, and everyone's been enjoying working with him. So I think from a staff perspective, we've already set them up because we have coaches who know so much about the game that they're going to be able to learn from. They have a positional coach who's going to be working with them for the majority of their time with them. And then we have a couple of other staff members who make the environment really good and really positive for young players to feel comfortable, feel like they are respected, and feel like they're growing. On top of that, like the players we have, like Jensen, Inspired, Bwipo, they're all like super great to be around in the office. And both Bwipo and Inspired were really, really excited about helping uh, like rookies with a lot of mechanical talent improve, because they know like from their experience that young players with high mechanical talent, that if you guide them and help them, it's going to pay off dividends. So they've done a massive part so far, and will continue to do great things in order to make sure the young bot side is like they're comfortable and are willing to learn. And yeah, like I've really enjoyed watching them work together so far. Like um, it's been really really fun. I'm really excited. Uh, like hearing the conversations that have been going around around the office, a lot of positive vibes. So I'm excited.
I mean, now I'm excited too. I must say that now I'm really happy and glad that you shared that. I had a lot of concerns with the FlyQuest roster. As I shared, and even like Jensen and Bwipo are known for like limit testing a lot in scrims, and like how does that translate to Masu and Busio really learning when games are being blown open so early on and things like that. But I mean, I almost wish like FlyQuest had like the IMT sort of video, where it's like this is why we brought everyone on, and like this is how we envision things working. So
I think
that
there's something in the works, like
oh
something
okay.
like that's going to come out soon. So I think we just waited for everyone to get into LA so that it can be like a better produced thing. Um, and I think there's a video on that coming out. But yeah, I know there's a lot of FlyQuest content gonna come out in the lead up to LCS, so I should be excited about that. And yeah, I mean, in terms of like Whippo and Gensel limit testing, uh, like for me so far, I think it hasn't been an issue. The season's still young, but uh, I think like the big thing that both Whippo and Jensen, like their big thing for this year is to show that they are top players, because I think they're two players that the community has kind of fallen off in favor of, and they kind of want to prove that they're still top dogs. I think they're still two players who are incredible and will be in the top of their position in the league. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Like I think Bwipo is the best, kind of literally one of the best players you can have for young players. Like he's super enjoyable to talk to. He's super open-minded about the game. He loves talking about the game. He's super inviting. Uh, Makes the game really easy. Like he plays, his preferred play style is tanks and bruisers. The way he plays on the map is he thinks, if he has a lead, he's going to share it around the map. And so, um, yeah, I think he's like one of the best pieces you can ever have um, for young players. And inspired, obviously, he and Peter has talked a lot about how he helped
Yeah.
Jojo and Danny, so I don't need to go too much detail there. And Jensen, I think one of his big goals is to be. Uh, he knows, there's a lot of players on this team that are aggressive, and that's a good thing for a team to have. You want to have players that want to push the edge, and one of his big goals is to be that piece that kind of holds the team together, and be kind of like that safety switch uh, for games. And so far in scrims and the way we envisioned it, it's been working out. So I'm excited to see how things keep going. But I think so far, like yeah, everything's going great.
That's awesome. That gives me a lot more faith in like Musio, Busio and
Lazio.
Masu. That might be their duo name. Like we had Rush Hour and whatnot. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, it gives me more confidence that they can actually develop and sort of shine, because I think, at least from the outside perspective, like Masu has been the next coming of Danny, even if he might not be as good as Danny. Um, he's like
I
the
think
next
he's
big
like
leaguer.
excellent in a. I think he's excellent in his own way. Like he's very different from Danny's playstyle, but he is one player who is going to make the game really tricky for the enemy team with how aggressive he likes to be, um, and how he's just going to be really annoying for teams to face.
And then Busio as well, like basically being seen as not the next Vulcan, but like probably the best support in NA in the next few years if he develops, right?
Yeah, I'm super excited about him. I mean, like he's already mentioned, I think, in an interview with Travis that he had several offers
Mhm.
from teams, um, and there's a reason to it. This is like he is so young still for support and has a high mechanical ceiling, and you really like supports scale really high, like
What do you
scale
mean?
really well. It's very rare for a support to come their first year and do super super well. Like even Vulcan, for
Uh,
example, like in his first split and most of his second split, he didn't perform that well on clutch gaming. It was really in playoffs. and the Gauntlet tournament that he really showed, it really shined. And then even then, people didn't really have that. I didn't really rate him at the top until he moved to C9 in his second year, and then he showed like his full capabilities. And yeah, that's what happens with a lot of supports. Is that in year two, year three, um, because like support is so knowledge based, um, they scale with time more than most positions.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Um, I guess this is a bit of a throwback back to like I think this was in 2020, but you had done an interview, and the interviewer asked the question, basically saying like if you could change one thing, in like the pro law scene in North America, what would you change? And you said the ping, to have better ping, and then you like followed up. You're like, can I change reality? And then he was like, sure. And you said, to actually have good coaches. Um, Obviously that was back in 2020. Things have changed a lot. So I want to kind of get your perspective on where scouting is and coaching is in like going into 2024. Because as Peter had said, like in 2021, maybe things weren't that great, but over the past like couple years, things have been getting better.
Yeah, it's changed. Yeah, for sure, it's changed. Like you've seen a lot more players retire and go into coaching, and that's helped so much, I think. And you see so many, ex pros coaching in various levels from LCS, LEC, ERLs, academy, and so on. And I think that's what has been the biggest difference between now in 2024 compared to 2020. So yeah, I think there are better coaches now, and it's just going to take some time for because I think that coaching is a very different skill from playing or understanding or analyzing the game. Like coaching is its own thing, and with enough of a timeline, the coaching will get a lot better, in my opinion.
All right. Well, at the end of this interview, where can fans like follow you? Like for example, I remember when you used to post on Reddit on your was it Gold Pretend, some website that like kind of died
Yeah,
off. You
Gold
used to
for
post.
10, and then there was one that was owned by Splice. I forgot what
Yeah,
the
and then
Solo Esports or something. I can't
yeah, and
remember.
you had like this show with Chakras, the Portuguese guy in EU,
The War
and
Room.
yeah, the War Room. Like, are you kind of not making any more content? Do you have more plans of making more things? Like, what? How can fans like follow you? Because it was entertaining back then reading your. I didn't watch most of your stuff, but at least I read a lot of what you wrote.
Yeah, I mean, you can follow me on Twitter, um, or X now, Nasser Al Naki, and I post from time to time there. I've fallen off of content because I dedicate a lot more of my time just watching, and it's kind of awkward to make content while you are working for a team. It feels like um, time restraints, and you don't want to like reveal your hand too much sometimes. But I'm also active on like some Discord, like Lolly's first Discord servers where I interact with fans because that's something that I really like to do before. I really like to go on Reddit and talk with fans, but the uh, the experience has gotten a lot worse on Reddit over the years,
Mm-hmm.
as well and on Twitter, like the discourse is a lot more based on memes and negativity rather than fruitful discussion. So right now I've found like some nice quality sports servers. Like there's the LCS server, there's the Oracle's Elixir server, and then there's Peter Dunn's server. And I'm active or semi-active on those from time to time. So you can catch me on there if you want to discuss any LoL related things or esports related things. And there's a lot of other members and fans on there who really like esports and discussing esports in a more fruitful manner. Uh, and yeah, so that's where I like to. That's where you can find me. Um, and then who knows? Maybe I'll appear on other shows and interviews in this coming year. So we'll see. But in terms of content, unfortunately, uh, not in the plans for now.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for watching. You can find the Peter Dunn interview I mentioned here, as well as make sure to subscribe. The League Partner Program, the LPP, is opening up again after being closed since 2018, and I need at least 1,000 subscribers to apply. I'm trying to make a push for it, so if you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe.